Today we're going to be making Italian meatballs from scratch with homemade marinara. We're going to work on today's recipe in two parts, and we're going to do the meatballs first. For the meatballs, you're going to need 1 to 1.5 pounds of hamburger, 1 pound of sweet Italian sausage, 1 teaspoon garlic powder, 1 teaspoon onion powder, 1 tablespoon Greek seasoning, salt and pepper to taste, a half teaspoon of oregano, a half teaspoon of basil, and a half cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Okay, we've gathered our ingredients for our meatballs together, and guys, there's just really no magic trick to this. You're just going to take your hamburger. Now, I'm using my stand mixer with a paddle attachment. If you don't have one of these, no problem. Take a big bowl, crumble everything in there, and squish it up really well with your hands. But I am going to use the stand mixer today. Kind of saves me a little bit of time. So I'm just going to crumble in my pound of hamburger meat. Just want to break it up. And then I have a pound of sweet Italian sausage. Now, if you like spicy, by all means get spicy. A lot of store brands have come out with their own variation, and from what we've tried, they're pretty wonderful. So pick your favorite. Now, into our meat, we're going to add our teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of onion powder, a tablespoon of Greek seasoning, and this is a half teaspoon of both dried oregano and dried basil. Now, the basil came from my garden, so it's a little bit chunkier, so I added just a little extra. And then here's the magic ingredient. I don't use breadcrumbs in my meatballs. I use a half cup of Parmesan cheese. Instead of just being a filler, helping to hold it together, it actually gives it flavor. And we're just going to lower it and let it do its thing. Now, this has been mixing for just a little bit. You know your family. You know whether you like things that are salty or spicy. I'm going to add, just for our family, just a pinch of salt and just a little bit of black pepper. There's going to be plenty of flavor from all of the other ingredients. So for us, I just really don't add that much. And then I'm going to give it just another slight mix. Doesn't take a lot. And we're ready to make meatballs. Now, as far as actually making the meatballs, there's lots of different things you can do. If you have a scooper and you want to make them all the same size, great. We're not that picky, so I usually just use a spoon, and I will scoop out some meat and just roll it up. Now, you can make them as perfect as you want to. They are going to cook down. The fat is going to render out just a little bit, so they're going to end up just a little bit different size and shape after they cook. We just kind of like a nice hearty meatball, something that's going to either fit well on top of some pasta, or one of our favorite ways to eat these is actually as a meatball sandwich. So we're just going to take our meat and roll it out. This is the part where I have to point out that my meatball rolling skills are under close scrutiny by my doggy food critics. So now we've got the meatballs rolled up. What we need to do is go ahead and get out our slow cooker. We're going to very quickly just brown the outside of these so that they don't fall apart while they're simmering later, and then we'll be ready to get started on the marinara. Okay, so we're going to just very lightly brown our meatballs on the outside. I'm using my Cuisinart again. This is actually one of my favorite kitchen utensils. I'm going to drizzle just a little bit of light olive oil down in the bottom. It can handle a little bit higher temperature. And I'm just going to take my meatballs and drop them in. Now, I don't want to cook my meatballs through. What I want to do is just kind of build up a little bit of a crust on the outside so that when I simmer them a little bit later in my marinara sauce, that they're not going to fall apart and turn to mush. So we're going to get these in here. I'm going to let them brown on one side, and then I'll turn them a couple times just to kind of get that crust going. As you can see, we're starting to get a crust on the outside of the meatball. Remember, you don't want to cook them through. You just want to kind of put that little bit of crust on the outside. Okay, so now we have browned our meatballs just a little bit on the outside. There's still some areas where you can see raw meat. That is perfectly fine. And I'm going to use my Cuisinart for the marinara as well. Now, this is hamburger meat, and most likely the Italian sausage is going to be pork. There's going to be a lot of extra grease. Now, normally I leave the fat because it's flavor, but because we're going to be cooking these slowly in the marinara sauce, you just want to make sure that you clean out that extra grease. It just saves you having to drain extra grease off the top later. Okay, so now we have set our meatballs aside, and we're going to gather up our ingredients for our homemade marinara. For the marinara sauce, you're going to need some olive oil, 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 medium onion chopped, 2 cloves of garlic chopped, salt and pepper to taste, a half teaspoon of red pepper flakes. You'll need a 14.5 ounce can of petite diced tomatoes and a tablespoon of butter for the very end. If you like a runnier sauce, you may want to add some chicken broth. If you like a thicker sauce, you may want to add some tomato paste and some fresh basil leaves for the end. Okay, so I have wiped out my crock pot. In there, I'm going to add just a little bit of regular olive oil, extra virgin. Don't want a ton, but enough, because we are going to be sauteing some vegetables. And into the olive oil, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. Now guys, this is one of those times when margarine just won't cut it. You really want to have that flavor and that fat from the real butter. Now I'm just going to put those in there and let them start getting hot. And into the melted butter and olive oil, what we're going to add is 1 medium chopped onion. Now, you know your family. If they like their onions very small, cut them small. My family does not mind a chunky sauce, so I'm just going to cut these in a little bit larger pieces. They are going to cook down. They're going to be very tender. But if you prefer smaller pieces, please cut them. Now I'm going to add my onions to my olive oil and my butter that's in my crock pot, and I'm just going to let them saute for a little bit. Now onions will take a little bit longer than the garlic that we're going to use next, so you want to give them just a little bit of a head start. We are also using 2 cloves of garlic, and I've already chopped 1, but I want to show you a really fast, easy tip on how to chop garlic. Now, you know your family. You know if your family likes garlic or not. If they're not real fond of garlic, choose 2 small cloves. My family loves garlic, so having big cloves is fine. To get the outer paper skin off, all you have to do is just lay it on your cutting board, put your knife blade over the top, give it a good whack, and that's going to make it very easy to separate that papery outside skin from the usable part of your garlic. Oh, we've reached temperature. And then just give it a chop. Now garlic cooks much faster than onion, so the onion's been in here sauteing for just a little bit. It's already starting to soften and turn transparent, so I want to go ahead and add my garlic. But I'm not going to let it cook for a long time because garlic cooks very quickly and it will start to burn. Okay, so the garlic has had a minute to go ahead and start sauteing. I'm going to add 14.5 ounces of diced tomatoes. I like the petite diced. If you're not real fond of chunky tomatoes, you can use tomato sauce. And into that, I'm going to add a half teaspoon of red pepper. It adds really good flavor. If you like a spicy sauce, add a little bit more. And then I'm just going to add some salt and pepper to taste. Now, when I'm using tomato-based products, my family does tend to like a little bit of salt. I don't usually put a lot in my meat, but I will put a decent amount in the salt, just in the sauce, just to kind of counteract the acidity from the tomatoes. You just want to give all this a good stir and just let that continue to warm up, come to a full simmer. Now, this is the point where you have to make a decision. Are you going to be using your marinara sauce for meatball sandwiches, or are you going to be using it for pasta? If you're going to be using it for sandwiches, having a nice thick sauce is what you want. You don't want it running all over the place. But if you're wanting to use it over pasta, this is where you might want to add some chicken broth, just to make it a little bit looser. It's better than adding water because it adds flavor. But for right now, this is nice and simmery. Time to add those meatballs back in. Okay, the meatballs are back in, and I'm going to turn this down to a simmer, and I'm going to let it cook for about 2 hours. Now, we kind of want to do both things with our marinara and meatballs, so I'm going to add just a little bit of chicken broth, and then I'm going to put the lid on and let it simmer. Okay, so I've got my meatballs set to simmer. I'm going to let it simmer 2.5 hours. And when we get done, at the very end, you have some options. If you love fresh basil or fresh oregano, it's great to go ahead and just put extra sprigs in right at the very end. But we'll also add that last little pat of butter just to kind of give the sauce a finish. Okay, so our meatballs have been cooking for about 2 hours on simmer, and you just want to take a look at them, stir them around. If they need a little bit longer to make sure that they are nice and tender and done all the way through, you know, that's fine. But these are looking really good. So we're at that very last point where we're going to add that last tablespoon of butter, and you're just going to stir it in and let it melt. And this is the point where if you have those fresh herbs, oregano or basil, go ahead and add it in. This is basil from my garden, and I'm just going to pick off some leaves and throw it in. Now, if you like a really smooth sauce, you can always take the sauce out, put it in a blender or use a submersible, and just blend it a little bit smoother. Like I said, my family doesn't mind a chunky sauce, so we're just going to let that sit in there, let the butter melt and incorporate, and allow that beautiful basil to release its oils. And then these will be ready to serve. At this point, you have a thin sauce with lots of chunks inside, which is perfect for a meatball sandwich. Just put it on a crusty piece of bread with some melted provolone or mozzarella, and it's wonderful. However, if you are serving pasta or you just want a thicker sauce, it's not too late. All you have to do is just kind of get the meatballs out of the way and add about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and just let it mix in, and you will still have a chunky but thicker and richer sauce. If you want a smoother sauce, super simple. Take your sauce, pour it into a blender, pulse it just a few times, and you will have a thick, rich sauce. Either way, your meatballs are ready to eat. Now, I will tell you that day-old leftovers are amazing. And you can also take your meatballs and marinara and you can put them in a freezer bag and they will freeze well. If you like these recipes and you would like them to continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, guys.